So let's compare Rob and Stark again. So if I compare Rob is less than Stark, it returns me true because R comes before S. So that is why it's true. Similarly, if I check if it's greater than, it will return me false. So that's how we can compare strings in Python using comparison operators. So that this was about introduction, what we have seen before. Now let's go with collections or containers in Python. So we have seen scalar data types like integer, float, strings, booleans. Now we'll look into containers, which are nothing but sort of data structures available in Python where we can store the data. So these are different available types in Python, and they are like list. We have dictionaries, we have sets, we have tuples. So these containers basically holds any type of objects, like different types of objects in a single container. Let's begin with list, how we can use list. So list is a compound data type which adds different kind of values together. Now let's look into creating list. So I'm again on Python shell. Let me again talk about Python shell, about using it. So we use exit function to get out of the Python shell. You see this. Again, I'll use Python command to get into the shell. This is my Python 3.5.2 version. Now about creating list. Say for example, A is equal to this, B is equal to 25, and my list is equal to 10, 20, A, B. If you see the print of my list, you will see different kind of objects available included into the list. Now if I check type of my list, it is object of class list. So list is a kind of container available in Python which holds together different types of objects, which we have seen in the example of my list. Now we will see what different operations we can perform on list. To create a list, we need to use the syntax of brackets, basically opening bracket and closing bracket, square brackets. If I create an empty list, A is equal to this. Different types of functions available are on list are like this. You have to use dot, and you can use tab command to see the number of functions available on list object. Now if I check a dot count, so count takes exactly one argument, so we need to pass a parameter, the list, to this function. If I check length of a is 0, this is the inbuilt length function. I check length of my list here, it's 4 because we have 4 different objects added into my list. If you want to see the first variable available on my list is 10, It's again same, it uses the same kind of indexing as a 0 as the beginning of the list, and length -1 as the end of the list. So we have length of 4. If I see length 4, it will be empty, list index out of range. But if you see 3, it will return me the last element from the list. That's about accessing elements of the list. If you want to see any specific element available in list, like 10 in my list, it will return true because it's available in that list. If you see 30 in my list, it's not available, so it's false. If you want to check that specific string, this in my list, it will compare that string into elements of the list and will find out if it's available or not. If you want to compare this is equal to this, that's how this comparison will take place. So this will this as a string will be checked in the entire list object. List is a kind of object from class list, and it adds different objects inside its object list. Now if you want to do replication of the list, we can simply multiply with the list and it will bring out me the same list twice. And if you want to assign this to a new list, for example, you can assign this. A shortcut to do that is using an underscore. If you want to use the output from your earlier command, you can use underscore and assign it to a new variable. Now you see new list is having the repeated list of my list. If you want to check the length of new list, it will be 8 because we have repeated it twice. I'm trying to delete an element from list, my list of second, and I print my list. So I've deleted a second element from my list, which was this. Using del function, it removed that element, and now my list has become 10, 20, 25. If I see length of my list is 3. Let me see if we have any available other functions. So we have built-in functions for my list, like let me push 40 on my list using append function. Now my list will have 40 added at the end of the list, which was the fourth element of the list. So if by using index of 3, you can see my list last element. You can add these two lists using addition operator. This won't actually add the elements inside the list, but it will quite replicate or concatenate it as a string. Though the type is list, but it will keep replicating if you use the concatenation. Similarly, multiplication won't happen because list object won't support that. Even division will not be supported. It won't also support minus thing because we are not doing any kind of arithmetic operations, though we are using arithmetic operators. List will support only plus as an arithmetic operator for concatenation of list. We have seen append function, delete function on the list. There are few more functions available on list as mean, max, which will return you the mean element or the max element using those functions. So if I use mean function from my list, it has returned me 10. If I use max function and pass my list as an argument to the max function, it returned me 40 as the max element. Consider if we have some sort of character or string available in this list. So this is a str element. Now my list is having str element. We have appended that. Now let me check what it will return from max function if I pass my list with some string variable. So when we use mean or max such functions, it will be required a specific data type. So we need to remove the last element, which we can simply use -1 index and pass it to the del function. And if you see now my list, now we have removed the string, and if I use max now function, it returns me 40 again. Now I'm trying to use my list pop function. I'll try to send a specific element and we'll check if it can remove. So we need to pass an index but not a specific element to the pop function. So I will pass 2 and it has returned me the element at second index, which is nothing but the third object available on the my list. So right now I have all integer objects in my list. So I popped that element out of the list. Now my length has become 3. Length of my list is 3. Now I want to append a float element on my list. So I'll use append function again. Or you can use like the last index. Let's try out that. Now I have 3 elements only, so let me add 40.0. So you cannot add an element out of the index range. Basically now we have only 3 elements. If I use second, it will add. Now if I print my list back here, it has replaced that earlier element with 40 as a float one. Now if I try to find out max from my list having integer and float different data types, it will still work because it can convert all the elements to floats, but it won't be able to convert as a string element to float or integer. Let me try to add a string element to the list which has a kind of integer value. Now if I see my list, it has 30 as a string, and if I try to find out max, so it won't convert it specifically. So we need to add a specific data type for mean and max elements. So it gives a type error as unorderable types string is comparable, is like sort of not going to be comparable with floats. Now let me try to remove last element again. My list pop third, as we have 4 elements, and I print my list again. So this is my list. Uh, we have seen append, we have seen min max functions, we have seen pop. Let me check if we have push function is there. We don't have push, but we have append. So these are the some sort of available functions on list. We can check the specific elements using in, not in. So as we have checked in, we can also check not in. So if you want to check the string, say like 40 not in my list, which says true because the 40 which we have compared is a string, but what we have available is float. But if we just check the 40 as an integer or float, it will return false because it is available 40 in my list, so it returns true. And not in will return false because we have available that value. It won't compare strings, but it compares floats and integers to available values. How about extending a list? Now you have my list, and if you want to add few more elements to the list, for example, I'll create new list, my list. We can simply concatenate using concatenation operator, which can also hold some string elements or some float elements. Now if you see new list has 5 elements. We have seen list with different data types. Now let's take an example of a home which has different rooms like hall, kitchen, living room, bedroom and bathroom with different areas in square meters. So we will have a list created with variables. For example, let me assign hall is equal to 11.28, kitchen is equal to 10.33. I'm considering these as float variables, and you need to remember that these are in square meters. Let's check bedroom to 15 square meters, nothing but integer. Let's check with bathroom to 6 square meter. So I've taken 4 variables. Let's take living with 20 square meters. So I have 5 variables in which I want to add it into my list. Now I'll create a list of areas is equal to, and I will pass these variables to my list now. So you can create a list using variables as well, or you can rather directly create using values. Now you have areas with 5 elements as the values of floats and integers which we have assigned to those variables. So this is what the list we have created. You can create a list of list as well by passing a list object inside a list. Now let's create a new variable as house is equal to, and we will pass list object hall with hall. Hall will be a variable, and the first one is a string and the second one is a variable which has the value of 11.28. Let's take kitchen to mention as a string and pass. So we are creating the list with 5 list objects, and each individual list object has a string and either float or integer variable. So I'm taking bedroom as string, passing the bedroom area to that list object. Let's take path, path, living with living area. So I've created house list with file list object. If you check the type of house, this is a class of list. If you check the first element of house, it will also be a list. If you check the first element, it should be a string because that points to hall. And if you check the second element of the inside first list object, it will be a float which is nothing but 11.28. Now if I print this house of 0 1, this is 11.28. That's about accessing the inside list elements. So we have created a list object using variables, and we have also created list object using list as inside objects, and list will have different objects inside list. Now we have checked about accessing those elements. We can use the range as well about getting the specific elements from the list.